Good morning, everyone, and also welcome from my side. Bear with me while I share my screen with you for just a little bit of background information on gender equality activities that we are carrying out in COST. I thought it would be useful to start this webinar with a short overview before we continue with our expert, who has, of course, will fill the main session here today. As Anna said, there will be a Q&A afterwards as well, so you'll all have plenty of opportunities to ask your questions and make comments. So in terms of gender equality in the COST program, how do we try to advance gender equality? First and foremost, through our cost excellence and inclusiveness policy, which most of you will be familiar with if you are active in cost actions. We have three main pillars there, and one of them strongly encourages the gender balance of research networks, and this is of course also evaluated at proposal stage. And we're also looking at the take-up of leadership positions by young women cost action participants. So how do we do this? Since the start of Horizon Europe, we have set ourselves a target, key performance indicator, as we call it, where we are trying to, where we will monitor the percentage of leadership positions occupied by women researchers, and we want to make sure that that reaches a percentage of 50% throughout Horizon Europe. We are at the moment at 48, so it's quite good, as is also demonstrated by this slide. The state of play of women representation in cost actions is positive at the moment. We do see, of course, one clear area where there's room for improvement, and that is the percentage of cost action chairs. Only 37%, or only, well, at the moment we have a percentage of 37% of action chairs are women. I am happy to report that this trend is going up. We see this going up in actions that are starting. Also this year, the actions that started just this month and last month, we see 44% of all chairs are women there. So really there's a positive increasing trend ongoing, which we're hoping to continue, and we'll continue to monitor this as well, of course. As many of you know, COST is an intergovernmental organization. So that means that we have a board consisting of government representatives that take strategic decisions and make strategic proposals for the continuation of COST. It's called the CSO, the Committee of Senior Officials. And last year, the CSO gave us the mandate, gave the COST Association the mandate for the establishment of a working group on the gender equality plan, which has become a prominent feature in Horizon Europe. Most Horizon Europe applicants need to have a gender equality plan in place when they apply for a call for proposals. We're working on getting this, as we're funded by Horizon Europe. I mean, we are a non-profit organization, so we're actually exempt from this eligibility criteria as COST, but we do, of course, want to set a good example, and we want to have a gender equality plan in place, so we're working on that. We have a working group currently ongoing who's making suggestions to advance gender equality in COST activities, and of course, in the end, draft the gender equality plan. So what is it exactly that we have been doing in this working group? So we have implemented a few activities this year in consultation with the working group. First of all, COST participated in the UN panel discussion on International Women's Day this year, after a screening of Picture a Scientist. It was a UN screening. We also ran a focus group on gender equality this summer, where we gave cost action participants the opportunity to provide feedback on the issue. And also for us, it was an opportunity to take the key lessons that were shared during this focus group and incorporate them in the gender equality plan, and also in the activities that we're currently developing for COST in the area of gender equality. Also this year, COST became a partner in a Microsoft partnership framework. It's a Microsoft initiative on gender equality called Conversations Unscripted. As you will receive the slides will be sent to you, so you can have all these links. If you're interested, please have a look at the website and see what we're doing there. Yesterday, there was a launch event, in fact, and we had a, we had a very interesting cost action there on nanoscale quantum optics. The gender balance advisor presented the surveys that the action had run on better understanding gender attitudes from both women and men towards women working in science. She came up with some fascinating results. So if you're interested, further information is available also on the website. Some more activities that we are developing in consultation with the working group today is an example of an activity that the working group had suggested to organize a webinar, hands-on training, presentation, hands-on information for our cost actions on how to integrate the gender dimension in research and innovation. So we're indeed very happy to have Professor Ineke Klinge here with us today. And then this webinar will be followed by a workshop, Cost Academy workshop at the end of the month, Gender Equality in Research and Innovation, where we have invited another expert on gender equality in research and innovation. So she will give a training there. And also we wanted to have a physical event. So this workshop will be physical in Brussels to give Cost Actions the opportunity to actually be in a room together and discuss this topic with each other. So we have developed a template for them on which the discussions can be based, because our aim is for the Cost Actions to start thinking about how they can develop a gender equality strategy or a gender equality action plan for their cost action. Going back a little bit to the Microsoft Conversations Unscripted, I've actually talked you through it already. This is the slide that gives the information on the event from yesterday, Minding the Gap. It was called Increasing Women Participation in Policy and Technology in Europe, where COST hosted one of 3 parallel workshops, and we chose the topic Women in Quantum Technology. And Professor Ruth Alton was the gender balance advisor from the nanoscale cost action that did the presentation, and it was really, really excellent. So I'm very happy to share those slides with you if this is a topic, women in quantum, that you're interested in. Just let us know. What's in the pipeline is the creation of an online gender equality community for COST in an online tool called Basecamp, which we're hoping to launch next month. And all of you are very welcome to be part of that as well. It's a community where we really want to give, again, the opportunity to Cost Actions to discuss in an informal way about the topic, to ask questions, have a chat, to share events with each other. That is a little bit the aim. We also are quite excited about the idea of setting up a women chair network. As you've seen, we can still improve our percentage of women chairs in Cost Actions. So we want to set up a network where we invite women chairs to have a chat with our younger female researchers active in younger women researchers active in Cost Actions. And that is one of the things in the pipeline as well. And then, of course, we're starting to draft a gender equality plan for activities in the COST program, which should be finalized early next year. So this is a little bit of information from me about what's happening in COST in the area of gender equality. And now I'm very happy to introduce to you again our professor that we have here with us today, Professor Ineke Klinge, who is professor in gender medicine and was most recently the rapporteur for the Horizon 2020 Gendered Innovations Project. I'm sure she'll tell you all about that during her presentation in a minute. She also chaired the Horizon 2020 Advisory Group for Gender at the European Commission between 2014 and 2018, and was the first president of the Dutch Society for Gender and Health, launched in 2017. So these are just two of the many things that Ineke has done in her career with a focus on gender equality in medicine. And it is now my pleasure, Ineke, to hand over to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Judith. And I'm really honored and thankful to be given the opportunity by the COST Academy to give my presentation for you as researchers or from different backgrounds. I intend to take you on, well, in a way, a trip along methods for taking sex and gender into account in research and innovation, because sometimes, or certainly after these some years, people have become convinced of the relevance of sex and gender, but the next question is, but how shall I do it? Okay, so I will take you with a focus on methods through the lecture that I will share with you now. There we go. Okay, so the importance of sex and gender analysis in research and innovation. So what do we have as state of the art? Hey, why doesn't it work? One moment. There we go. So, as I said, there is an increased awareness of the relevance of sex and gender factors for research and innovation. What's more, that science funding bodies are asking for integration of sex and gender analysis as a condition for funding. But at the same time, there is a lack of training in sex and gender sensitive methods among researchers and engineers, but because they never were taught during their training in medical schools or in biomedical sciences. But happily, we have Gendered Innovations, which has provided field-specific methods to do so, and has also produced case studies to illustrate the added value. But how did it all start? If you see in this picture a crowd of ordinary people, all kind of people, women, men, maybe gender diverse people, young people, older people, white people, people of color. So as an ordinary crowd where you can encounter each and every day. So why do we see this in biomedical research? Just one kind of person who is included in, for instance, research into medications. The young white male of about 20, 25 years and around 70 kilo. Do we think that is a problem? Yes, we think that is a problem, because around 2000, 10 drugs, medications were taken from the market, and 8 of those had more and more severe effects in women. So that's quite a shocking figure. And some of the severe effects were actually death of women. So what is the explanation of how could it be that drugs that were on the market had such deleterious effects on women? Well, because most research was done in males, whether in male animals or in male humans. And even for the discipline of preclinical research that works with cells and tissues, there was no mention of the source or the sex of cells or tissues. And of course, all sex have sex. And this is further illustrated in this figure, how for different branches of biomedical research, the researchers have collected the percentages of using male or female animals. And as you see, for most bars, there is the blue bars are the largest for, and that includes only males. The red bars are a little bit smaller, except for reproduction and maybe immunology. But what is really worrying here are the big gray bars, meaning that the sex of the cells or the sex of the animals or the sex of the participants is not specified. So how could that be a real interesting research outcome? In fact, it is not. It would not be excellent science, and it's really not acceptable anymore today. So it is time for change. That was, I think, the voice from the women's health movement, from feminist biologists, from early pioneers in gender medicine. Time to do away with the one-size-fits-all paradigm. So then we land with the two most important concepts in this domain of paying attention to differences between men and women in research. And then we have two concepts, sex and gender. They're conceptual different concepts, and it's important. The concept should not be conflated or used as a substitute for another. But we have sex, and that refers to biological attributes of humans and animals, including physiology, physiological features, chromosomes, gene expression, hormones, and anatomy. And the other concept is gender, and that refers to socially constructed roles, behaviors, expressions, and identities of girls, women, boys, men, and gender diverse people. And it's important to consider that gender as a concept is multidimensional. There's a whole bunch of literature on gender from the social and humanities, social sciences and humanities. But for to work with the concept of gender in biomedical research and in medicine, it is important to at least see that there are various levels. There's the level of gender norms, which relates to how behaviors, which behaviors are suited for men and women, which professions they can have, etc. Gender identities, that is how a person presents him or herself and how he is encountered by others in society. And a third level is gender relations. That is about relations between people with different identities, where you can see, for example, the relation between a male physician and a female patient, but also relations on an institutional level where all kinds of rules are in vigor. I will return to these levels of gender identity a little bit later on, but it is meant to make the concept of gender a little bit more easy to grasp for researchers, because sometimes people say, oh, what is gender? It is a concept that is fluid, it is in development, and of course that is true. It is dependent on time and place, because norms for men and women can vary whether you work in Western countries or somewhere in other parts of the world. So it is helpful to see how different levels are involved or not. This is also illustrated, the levels in gender, in the concept of gender, and also the different features of sex by this infographic from the Canadian Institute for Gender and Health. They are really pioneers, and they have produced a lot of materials for researchers to integrate sex and gender. And you see on the sex side the different anatomical and genetic and physiological features. Note that also they pay attention that men and women are the two big categories within the biological domain, but a couple of persons, or there are persons with an intersex condition who have which you cannot classify exactly into male or a female body. And on the gender side, you see that all these expressions of gender, like clothing, identities, behaviors, tasks you have between persons in a society. And the important thing is that the two influences, so the sex-related influences and the gender-related influences, come together in a person, and it's hardly in a person to separate which outcome is due to sex-related factors or which outcome is due to gender-related factors. And this is also illustrated in a picture made by Vera Regitz from Charité in Berlin, where you have biologically related factors in the lower side of the picture and gender-related factors in the upper side. And you see that they interact already in a very early stage if you consider the epigenetic modifiers on germ cells. So external influences already on a very early level, even before birth in a person. And then, of course, all biological effects continue from the germ cells to the fetus, to the child, to the adult, as our societal gender-related influences. So two important concepts. They are conceptually different, but they work together, and that's the message you should take hold in mind. And then there's another thing. This relevance of sex and gender was established in a way by pioneering researchers, but now there are international science funding bodies who ask for integration of sex and gender as a condition for funding. And these are a couple of those important science funding bodies, like the European Commission, who has been asking for integration of the gender dimension, and that's the term they launched for integrating sex-related and gender-related factors, or performing a sex analysis and gender analysis. Their word is the gender dimension, and as a side notation, this new term launched by the European Commission it was a good one, and they were sincere in their ambitions, but the term itself was a little bit confusing because it only had gender in it. And then in 2010, the Canadian Institute for Gender and Health followed with asking these kind of conditions for funding. In 2014, the National Institute of Health in the US, and I'm from the Netherlands, so I'm quite proud that also in 2016, the Dutch Ministry of Health funded a special program called Gender and Health, for which it was a condition that applicants to that program made a serious effort to integrate sex and gender factors. But what were the reasons for these science funding bodies to ask for integration of sex and gender analysis? Well, the European Commission said that it would help to improve the scientific quality and societal relevance of the produced knowledge, technology, or innovation. And in Canada, the integration of sex and gender-based analysis plus is about improving the rigor, reproducibility, and generalizability of science, simply about excellent science. In the US, they have in the early years since 2016 focused on sex-related differences. So their policy is called sex-based analysis of sex as a biological variable policy. And it is meant to be a new standard to enhance reproducibility through rigor and transparency. They had concluded that many basic and preclinical research simply was not reproducible because the sex of the animals or the cells was not taken into account. And in the Netherlands, that gender and health program aimed to reduce differences in health between women and men by addressing gaps in knowledge. So now we are with the new requirements of Horizon Europe. I think this is the context where also the Cost Academy and all applicants under for the Cost Association will have to deal with. So what are the new requirements that are in place now? That the integration of the gender dimension into research and innovation content has become a requirement by default across the whole program. So where it started in 2002 and with a kind of stimulation of attention to sex and gender, and then followed by support for the research community and all kind of other policy measures. Now it has become a requirement. And for anybody who will reading these requirements, they are referred to the Gendered Innovations Policy Report, which I'll turn it to in a few minutes. And the second new requirement is that public bodies, research organizations, and establishments of higher education, so universities, will have, starting from 2020, a gender equality plan in place in an effort to stimulate sustainable institutional change. And in these gender equality plans, there are at least 5 themes. I will not go into that now because you will have a separate training on that. But one of the themes, of course, is there also integration of the gender dimension in research next to measures of participation of women and actions against sexual harassment, etc. So these two new requirements can be seen as the results of the works that we have done for the Engendered Innovations 1 and 2. So what has been Gendered Innovations 1 and what has been Gendered Innovations 2? In 2011, an expert group was convened by the European Commission to develop methods for sex and gender analysis and to provide case studies to illustrate how sex and gender analysis leads to discovery. As I already said, the minds were open and were inclined to really make a serious business of integration of sex and gender. So they were convinced of the relevance, but what was lacking were tools for researchers. So in a way, Gendered Innovations produced the tools for researchers to integrate sex and gender analysis into their research. And these commissioned expert groups, it was a real pleasure to participate in those groups, and they were, and we had invited experts from all different domains of the European framework programs. As you may know, the European research covers a large amount of fields ranging from health, climate change, energy, environment, transport, food, ICT, etc. So from all these domains, we brought experts together, and then in a series of workshops that were held over 2 years for the first edition, and in different places of Europe and US, we developed these methods and case studies, and all was brought together, of course, in a report, and you will have all the references at the end, but also in a website. And these Gendered Innovations expert groups were chaired by Londe Schiebinger from Stanford University as chair and by me as rapporteur. This is also a term invented by the European Commission, but I like it. So this is a screenshot of the Gendered Innovations website. To the left-hand side, there is also the portal where you see all the methods, the explication of terms, terminology. So what is sex, what is gender, what is intersectionality, etc. And then the list of case studies. And you see here a list of the icons of some of the most recently produced case studies, which you can see is also about marine science, where sex turns to be sex-related factors turned out to be very important for conservation of nature. And then there was a second edition that was commissioned after an interim analysis had revealed that the first 2 years of Horizon 2020 had shown some success, because there was a newly introduced requirement, or a newly introduced phenomenon, so to say, that in the work program certain topics were gender flagged. It's a strange word, but they were gender flagged topics, that meant that those topics in the work program were considered as, well, it's obvious that sex and gender are relevant for these topics. And then researchers were asked to especially pay attention to sex and gender for those topics. And then with the different editions of the work program, there have been 3 work programs in Horizon 2020, we could see that the number of gender flagged topics increased. So there was an increased awareness among work program writers, topic proposers, to see the relevance of gender and sex factors, and also to flag certain topics. But there was room for improvement. So the the mandate for the second expert group, Gendered Innovations, was to give a revision of the existing materials, to give updates of methods, to produce new case studies for all domains of EU research, and also to anticipate new developments, for example, in artificial intelligence. It all should be in an EU context, because the Commission also wanted to profile the successes of Horizon 2020 on integration of the gender dimension. So to show that it had been a real interesting and productive requirement and policy. And this second expert group should also gear all materials to the, should be policy oriented, meaning should spell out the relevance for the clusters and missions of Horizon Europe. You will find again all these materials on the website. But I'd like to show you now the cover of Gendered Innovations 2, and the cover on the left-hand side, and the contents, the list of case studies, the new case studies on the right-hand side. And note again that there are many research fields covered by the second project, like health, climate change, energy and agriculture, urban planning and transport, information and communication technologies, but also finance, taxation and economy. And in spring 2020, we were asked, when the expert group was already at work, to produce a case study on the COVID-19 pandemic. So a really interesting project, and also to work with experts from all these different domains. I myself am trained in biomedical research, so there it's obvious that that dealing with persons, you have well, in the first place, or at least the biological related factors, and then all those socio-cultural gender related influences. But for domains where you is not direct a person as a participant in a way, there's always the persons and as an end user. And an end user also is a person of flesh and blood, having perception of warmth, for instance, and also functioning in a society where gender norms are permanent and invasive. So in a way, another way to say that there's hardly any topic in the world, maybe some problems in mathematics or in physics, where sex and gender related factors are not relevant. But it's to us, to researchers, to show how that can be done better. And now I would like to focus a little bit on the methods, as I promised you, because if many of you are researchers, you would really, I think, need to have a very practical tool to how do I take account of sex-related factors when proposing a research, when designing a research. And so these are the three main general methods. And next to the general methods, we also have field-specific methods, for instance, for transport or waste management. So analyzing sex, how do you do that? And don't get afraid from this picture. You can find it in a very easy format also on the Gendered Innovations website. But it is to illustrate that, and I will not read all these pizza slices, that analyzing sex or taking account of sex-related factors, it can enhance all phases of research, and it's relevant in all phases of research. For instance, if you start a research with identifying a problem, then I think you can ask in relation to sex, what sex-related factors are of relevance in your study? Are they genetic, physiological, hormonal, anthropometric, etc.? and also how these factors maybe interact with gender, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic factors, etc. So, in setting up your statistics, it is interesting how you will take sex into account as a covariate, as a confounder, or an explanatory variable. And so you see that all the pizza slides have a number of bullet points, and together they make a whole, they give a whole whatever checklist of conducting a research, where you can find in all those bullet points with the references included what is important there and how to do it. The same holds true for analyzing gender. Again, you go through the whole research cycle, and gender is first in the first pizza slice, to consider the project's relevance in terms of the different levels of gender. Is it about gender identities, how people feel their identity, express their identity, or is it about norms, things in society, or is it about relations? So you can fine tune on the levels of gender, which is important, I think, for understanding of the concept of gender, the complex concept of gender, and also being very precise that I am addressing gender norms here and not identities, which makes it, I think, also clear to the outward world. And then a new method that we invested in is intersectionality, and how to analyze or how to incorporate the concept of intersectionality in your research. And as a concept, intersectionality describes the overlapping or intersecting categories such as gender, sex, ethnicity, age, socioeconomic status, sexual orientation, and geographical locations that combine to inform an individual's identities and experiences. So a person is always somewhere at the crossroads of a number of social identities. Not all and not all together, but for it's important to realize for your particular research question, what kind of social positions are in place or at stake for this particular problem. Now, maybe it's time to illustrate all this theoretical stuff with some clinical, with some case studies. And I have chosen a couple of case studies from clinical research, from public health research. If we have time, from agriculture, because a completely different domain, but also from artificial intelligence technology. So I hope you like it. And I must say, this is just a snapshot of the case study, and all case studies in full, fully elaborated are on the website with short abstracts, the full case study, a kind of summary for journalists, for telling your neighbors or your colleagues in very few words what is the relevance and how to do it. And this is just a very sneak peek on case studies. The first one deals with chronic pain. And there are, of course, sex-related aspects in pain signaling, because pain signaling goes via different pathways. You can see it in the male and in the female. And when there is a peripheral injury somewhere at your skin or whatever, the perception of pain is led to the brain. And you can see that in males and female, different cells are involved in signaling or in that pathway from the injury to the brain. In males, it's the microglia that are involved, and in females, it's the T cells that are involved. So that is very interesting to know. But then there are also different particular situations where, for instance, in males that are lacking testosterone, then they switch to the female path, and then this pain signaling goes through the T cell. And in females that lack T cells, or that are pregnant, then they switch to the male pathway. Well, this has been detailed very beautifully by the reference you see here, why the sexes don't feel pain the same way. And of course, it is investing in these, trying to understand these, identify and understand these pathways might help to design sex-specific pain treatments. But that's only the sex-related part. There are also gender-related aspects interesting and relevant in pain research, because women and men are raised by gender norms to express pain differently. Men get messages to be tough and not to show pain, and you can see that gender stereotypes are playing their role here. So at least in three varieties. So gender stereotypes can influence how pain is experienced, so how you feel pain, but also a patient's willingness to report pain, and also how healthcare professionals manage pain. It has turned out that, for instance, that women are more often referred for psychological treatment than for actual pain treatment. So there's an idea that pain in women might be caused by a psychological cause. So sex-related factors and gender-related factors are both relevant to take into account in pain research. And this example is from public health. And it is about understanding the risk factors for non-communicable diseases. Non-communicable diseases are, for example, cardiovascular disease, cancers, type 2 diabetes. And these diseases are primarily caused by preventable risk factors. So research into these risk factors is a very interesting issue. And again, you can see how in how the outcome. So on the right-hand side, the accumulated risk of developing non-communicable diseases is an interplay between sex-related biological factors, the blue area, and gender-related social factors, the yellow area. So they both determine that risk of developing non-communicable diseases. But how can we see now the gender-related efforts, for example, in physical activity? Well, or in obesity. Let me take the example of obesity. So then we have to look to gender norms in lifestyle. And it could be the case that gender norms in society lead men to exercise more than women. And this can lead to greater disease among women. Or perhaps gender norms in society lead men to eat less healthy food than women. So this gendered behavior can lead to greater disease among men. And there are also, I think, gender-related norms relevant to food, to other behaviors. Okay, I would like, I had thought it would be interesting to give an example from a completely different field, which is agriculture, because, well, in a way to show how large and how many varieties European research has, and but it's I think I'll give a short summary, not go into the case study in large detail, but it is the problem was because every case study starts with a problem, and the problem here was that agricultural innovations tend to impact women and men differently. Most innovations focus on resolving technical problems, such as raising yields, withstanding environmental stress, and managing poor soil or seeds. But such innovations, and that was the problem, fail to account for how gender norms influence the implementation of a technical solution, and how the implementation of a technical solution often will perpetuate gender norms. So innovations in a way may not reach women in rural countries and may even amplify gender inequality. Well, so this project thought to address this, this backside or flip side of technological innovations, and they employed a gender transformative approach where they held sessions with women, with their husbands, with their in-laws, with the whole community to examine gender roles, to also try to convince the positive norms of supporting women, and also trying to transform underlying social structure. But this is all very much beyond the actual thing that they did, because what they proposed was that women should use a particular set of kind of nets to catch fish, because men were catching a particular kind of fish and women were not allowed to catch that fish. So with a new branch of nets, women were in the possibility to catch their own fish. And in that way, they were able to, to secure food for the family. They also gained some autonomy that was acceptable for their husbands and environment. So in a way, all this, the approach to these communities had the result that there was a real improvement of the position of women. But I would advise you to read this case in full length because it's very interesting. The ICT case studies are of course, focusing on artificial intelligence. And we have produced a case study on facial recognition, or on extended virtual reality, virtual assistants and chatbots. And the method used here was analyzing gender norms, and analyzing intersectionality, so the different positions in society. And of course, I think you all have been made aware by media, I would say the last year, that the main problem of algorithms is that they have been trained on a too narrow population of data. And I feel that awareness of this problem has been created and improvements have started. For example, for facial recognition, you will see it in the case study, but the first algorithm to be used for facial recognition, recognized white men very well, but recognized darker skinned women very badly. And that was because the algorithm was trained on white men only. Well, I must say I come to an end of this lecture, and as a kind of conclusion, I would like to spend a few words on diversity and inclusion. Diversity and inclusion are popular expressions. They can both be found, although framed in other words, in the three objectives of the EU gender equality policy. And inclusion of women in research is one of these objectives. And the figures you recently showed, or just also at the beginning of this webinar, have been interesting. And I must say the numbers about women in the various branches of the cost association are telling. But what does inclusion mean for the content of research? And that would be my primary interest. I would say that only adding women is not enough. And that is why, according to me, inclusion or an inclusive science also needs innovative research methods, meaning that excellent research considers sex, gender, and other social positions, such as age, ethnicity, sexual orientation, etc. Adding women and not changing the methods will do no good. And the Second point for to take home is that not only researchers are needed, there is now a lot of training materials for researchers. Researchers get support, researchers are stimulated, maybe even researchers are rewarded if science funding bodies will reward the integration of the gender dimension. But we need all stakeholders, also peer reviewers, journal editors, and of course, educational curricula. I think that I have the resources here, and these are more resources, especially about training and video and other materials from the US and Canada, and another one here. And that was my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ineke.
Stop sharing. Okay, yep.
Yes, you stopped sharing. Thank you very much for that. It was so incredibly interesting. And I think overall, you gave us a very clear explanation of how the gender and sex concepts work together. I think this is often an area where people are confused and don't know exactly how it works, and that you illustrated very well also with the tool, the research cycle, that I think would be a very interesting tool for researchers to actually go back to and use it on a practical basis. I certainly will have a closer look at that. I think it will help us as well. Yeah. I have a few questions. Before I go to those, I was wondering if I could ask one as well. Because from my experience, there can be quite a lot of reluctance and negative attitudes towards dealing with gender equality in general, towards giving it a place in our work even. And it might be a bit of a tricky question, but I was just wondering if you have any advice for how to convince senior management, for example, of the importance of having, for example, a JEP in place, gender equality plan, of carrying out, the importance of carrying out sex and gender analysis, or simply to give gender equality a place in our work. Is there any advice that you can give?
Well, of course, it's difficult. You have well, your measures to convince people about the added quality. I think the argument of quality is an important one, and I must say that in business circles, it's all about equality and diversity, etc. And then they somehow they see the added value of having a mixed board or whatever. But I think for researchers and who are dependent on money from funding bodies, it is money that tells. So yeah, if you make the investment because you think it's relevant, but that sex and gender should be integrated in your research and intersectional factors for that matter. But if you get your efforts rewarded with a higher chance or a bigger amount of money, that's the thing that works. Money tells, at least for researchers, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure.
That was also the experience with the Dutch Gender and Health program. So there was 12 million for 4 years, and then a number, and maybe in the early instances that Zonnemey thought that will there be enough applications? Well, I think in the end of the program, it's now closed, that we could only reward 25% because of the limited amount of money. Of the very good projects that were submitted. I think over 50% of the projects were excellent. So we could only fund, say 25% of them. That meant that a large majority of proposals came from people who had never thought about sex and gender, but because there was the money, then they applied for it. And then it was learning by doing.
Yeah. And right now, I think we can draw a comparison between what the examples you just gave and also the JEP now, that is a requirement experiment in Horizon Europe, so people will have to do
In
it.
a way, they will have to, and European money is prestigious money, and so you better do it.
Yeah. Good advice. Thank you. I will move, as we're approaching the end, I will move to the questions from the audience. There's a question from Judith Brenner who says it is indeed clear why it's important to record the sex of participants in a clinical trial, but could you elaborate a little bit on why it would be important to know the gender of participants, for example, in a field such as humanities?
Gender. Translation studies.
Yeah, she indeed mentions translation studies as a.
Especially, I would expect that in the humanities, people are more inclined to really invest and to see and to understand identities of persons. So gender identity would be, I think, an interesting thing. But there's this. My field is translation studies. The number of do they mean the sex of the participants or the gender identity of the? So what kind of level of gender are you referring to here?
Yeah. I understand the question. It's I'm not sure if you did this. Unfortunately, the participants cannot
answer here.
They cannot answer. They can write. But
that would be my idea to give back to her as a return question, to know the gender of participants. What do you mean by the gender? Is that the gender identity, or is it the sex of the participant? Be clear about it, because otherwise you cannot give a good answer.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. Well, while we perhaps wait for an answer to that, I would like to continue also with another question about from a colleague of mine, Michael Pirot, who's asking, we often hear gender equality as a target. I understand this is misleading based on your explanation, but what would be, in your view, a clearer terminology?
Well, gender equality is a policy aim of organizations like the European Commission, etc. But the many different organizations have different descriptions and different definitions of gender equality. So it is in the interesting part about the European Gender Equality Commission that it is from the start not only about participation of women, but also about integration of the gender dimension. So that has been their policy from 2000 onwards. And of course, in the research community, well, they could understand gender equality in terms of participation, but what equality meant in terms of the content of research, of innovation, well, that has lasted 20 years now that we have it so firmly established now. So you should really focus on how an organization frames gender equality and what kind of activities or aspects they take into account.
Yeah. Thank you, Ineke. There's an interesting question here from Bara Bonova, who is writing, do you know something about the research on the credibility gap? For example, the opinion of men being more trusted than the ones by women.
No, I don't know. But it's interesting. I only know the popular talks that people prefer a male voice in their TomTom or navigation system in the car or whatever. So, but that's, Bara will know. Yeah, no, I do not know.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. That's an interesting example.
It's very interesting. I would love to read what she has when she has completed writing. Yeah.
Okay, good. And how can we incorporate a gender dimension in a food processing base for a project, for example, dealing with bioprocessing of fish byproducts? Sorry if that's.
Oh, interesting. Well, there's in the food processing basement. I'm currently involved with a colleague from Wageningen University, who is a professor of food and food information about food. How do you call it? food communication, but also the underlying biomedical aspect. We've been asked for a consortium on nutrition and a big consortium on nutrition research to give a lecture in next year in Ireland. And well, of course, I'm the generalist who knows about the method of sex and gender analysis, but she's the specialist in food research. So we are asked to give that presentation, but it still has to be fleshed out. And also in the end, they asked for a paper to compose, to make a paper of that presentation. So it's really interesting that there are ideas about, but again, this is the thing what I would know from conversation with friends, etc. The kind of food preferences by women and are different from the food. Yeah, I think there are different attitudes in a way, but then I think you should be very careful not to see women as a whole. So not all women are the same. Mm-hmm. So, and it can be that food preferences are also influenced by those intersectional factors. It's very well possible.
Yeah. Thanks very much. I just go through the next one, just because I know more questions are coming in. We will not, unfortunately, have time to answer all of them, but I'm going through the list. So another participant's asking that the Commission is requiring us to address sex and gender in research proposal, but she's wondering if the material is only asked because it's required, and she's not sure how seriously it's taken. Do you have any insights in that?
Well, that was, of course, in the early years of asking for sex and gender. It was difficult for the research community. It was a top-down thing. They had no knowledge. They had no. It was not a bottom-up thing where they saw the relevance. So, in the first years of having this stimulation of the integration of the gender dimension. It was very sometimes ridiculed that researchers asked one another, so what is the sex of yourselves today? In a way from, I know nothing. And later on, then it resulted in a way that you had to fill it out at your proposal, that you just picked the box. And then the thing that came on top of that, what the researchers had done and had written in the proposal, then it comes to the reviewers who had no knowledge either of sex and gender integration. So they either looked at a box that was ticked, okay, then it was, without understanding if it had a real sense of doing. So was it really taken into account, or was it just, well, ticked because it was a list of points to be completed? And so, especially in Gendered Innovations 2, we try to address these issues, but then you have to go to the evaluation forums, to training evaluators, to asking to secure that during evaluation panels there are real questions. There is a real question on how well the sex and gender were integrated, and then just not it was integrated, yes, but how it was integrated, can you read it in the methods, can you read it in the problem formulation, etc. And I must say that the Canadians really have encountered, of course, the same problem, and they have developed a really short video, I think it's less than 5 minutes, for peer reviewers on what is a good integration of sex-related factors and what is a good integration of gender-related factors. And this is a compulsory training for someone to act as a reviewer in the Canadian Institute of Health Research environment. Of course, we would like to have it in Europe also, but there are some good examples, good practices. And in general, you were talking about reluctance of colleagues. Experts at European level are considered experts, so I don't have to learn anything more. I'm already an expert. So
Yeah, so they would benefit from maybe applying the Canadian model here.
Oh yeah. Of course, we have been pushing for that, and I must say that the Commission has done real good work after that. We have completed the policy review, Gendered Innovations 2, by producing own fact sheets, own new explanations of the gender dimension, what is meant by gender equality, also taking into account this focus on intersectional factors. And I must really make them a compliment for that, how seriously they say it everywhere at any by any possible means.
Yeah, that's really good to know. I think that's quite reassuring as well, that it's not just a ticking the box exercise, but there's more to it. And then I'm going to just cover 2 more questions because we have run over, but this one is an interesting one. It's a bit long, but I'm going to read it out from Milena. With regard to the cumulative effect of risk factors for NCDs, the global burden of disease methodology differentiates the 3 broad groups of risk factors for ill health: behavioral, environmental, and occupational and metabolic. What would you say is the contribution of different policies and regulatory factors in addressing sex and gender factors?
Interesting. Well, of course, for behavioral factors, there you would see all those behaviors of men and women influenced by gender norms. That's obvious, that to see how that how gender norms can influence a person's behavior, whether you go on time to the doctor, how you your eating pattern. It's all influenced by, because men eat red flesh, for instance. That's a thing which is heavily influenced by gender norms. Environmental is about exposure. So because women and men working in different areas of society are exposed to different factors or pollutants, say someone working as a hairdresser or working in construction industry. That's, I think, and these exposures are, well, you can say you should avoid them, but if there's no other possibility to have another job than working in those sectors, then it's a factor to take into account. So that's environmental, and also pollution from the environment, occupational, yes, I just said. And metabolic, there's another a second part to that question on non-communicable diseases. If you look at the website, at the second part, which which it goes into the metabolic effects, for instance, of giving vitamin E to persons in an elderly, in a home for the elderly, and how this vitamin E might be helpful to prevent a kind of lung disease. And then it turned out that the same substance, vitamin E, had effects in women only and not in men, and in women only with a certain gene expression. So there you go into the biological things.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you. And just a final point, because Judith Brenner got back to us about the question about translation practitioners that identify as female in a study. Would you see this as a problem? She means the gender identity, because we were wondering, does she mean the sex or gender identity? She's saying her question is really in relation to the gender identity. So how important is it to know the gender identity of participants in humanities?
Yes, and then also in her special field of
translation studies.
Yeah, okay. Now, well, I don't know whether she is hinting at a thing that, because now we have translation, so that has to do with language, and now that we have at least many more people who do not identify with the sex that they are given at birth, so and also people who are non-binary people who want to be called his or her or him. So I think that gender identity issues for those groups of trans or non-binary people is really important if you are working in a sector related to language.
Mhm.
But for this, I would not know. I couldn't say more general without knowing her exact word.
Yeah, of course. Thanks very much. The remaining parts, there are some more comments and also questions. People asking for resources which you have given in your slides, and we will share those as well with the participants. Someone asking about the Women Share Network, of course, that is in the pipeline, and I promise we will share information about this as soon as it's available. So not to worry. With that, I would like to thank you so much, Ineke, for your very, very insightful presentation. I've learned a lot. I think everyone else has as well. Thank you very much for your time, for sharing your expertise. We are very grateful.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.
Very good. That's very good to hear. We cannot give you an applause, but very much nevertheless.
And I'll look up my camera because now I'm completely vague for myself. So maybe my camera is outdated. But okay.
Okay,
I'll look for the one.
Okay,
thank you. Well.
Thank you very much.
And have a good day. And I'll look forward to any more questions or whatever.
We will be in touch. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.